Hello, guys, and welcome to the Boxing Wrap. This is a brand new boxing podcast here on YouTube. I'm delighted to be joined by my co-host Kenny. Kenny, how are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, Sean, mate. How are you? Just trying to, just lock down and stuff. Not much going on, so
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
I'm surviving, just keeping low at the moment.
yeah, it's very much the same here. Very much the same everywhere.
So, of course, why we're doing this, boxing. Not much going on at the moment, but the one thing that we may be able to look forward to is Eddie Hearn's fight camp. What do you think of that so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good idea. I mean, they're obviously going to have to be really careful with what they're doing, but it's a bit of a light at the end of quite a dark tunnel. But you have to applaud the guy. There's a lot of things you could say about Eddie Hearn, but he is, at least he's trying something, right? And I
Yeah.
think this was probably inspired in part by what Dana White was doing in the UFC, right?
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk with the UFC with their sort of private island, what they hope to do over there. It's going to be interesting to see how this goes initially. Obviously, it's going to be only UK fighters predominantly. The one thing that was interesting, though, that I see is how they're going to work with it all. Is it appears that they're going to have all the people in the hotel. Obviously, they've got to get tested, but potentially, if one person is to contract the virus, and then obviously it all could be scrap. Really, what's your thoughts on the logistics of it all?
Yeah. I mean, even if one person gets this, you're talking about having to, I don't know, disinfect the right word because
Yeah.
virus, but you're literally, it's potentially the whole area infected. So I say it's going to be a tough thing to manage that, right? So one person gets it, that could curtail the whole thing. But
Yeah.
you would think that having to go to all the trouble, that I don't know, I mean, they should get tested before they turn up, right?
Yeah, I don't know if you watch the stuff he does with Kruger on IFL, but he
Yeah,
was saying the other day that they're going to sort of when they get to the hotel, they're going to be locked in their room as it was for their test results to come back, and then obviously if they test negative, they can stay and fight, and if not, they're positive. But it just seems it's going to be quite crucial how they sort of do it logistically, if it's going to work out or not, really.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's going to be quite tough as well because keeping, I mean, boxers are, they don't have the greatest temperaments of people. I'm not saying they all do,
No.
but trying to keep them away in a room for, I don't know how long, for several days is going to be pretty tough, right? Especially if you're putting few guys that don't like each other in quite close proximity.
Yeah,
It's one of the challenges that's going to come with trying to do that. Trying to keep volatile characters locked inside the rooms for days. I think that'll be a challenge for starters.
yeah. Then obviously on top of that, with the guys that may be struggling at the weight, you got that which will affect their temperament as well. So it, I don't think you want to be a fly in the wall in any of that situation.
Well, that's the thing as well. I mean, a lot of boxers, especially with there being nothing having happened in the last few months, you know, uh, some of these guys are still trying to be cut weight, right? So the stresses that go with that, and if you're trying to cut weight, really, really trying to cut weight, you know, the stresses of that, and then being locked up in a hotel room, it could get to a few of these guys, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, I think they must have some trouble at the moment because initially they was hoping to start the 30th of July, I think, and now just reading a couple of articles online, that's already been pushed back to July the 15th. I think they're still hoping to have the last show with Dylan White and Povetkin. For me, that's quite bizarre, really. A fringe world title fight in the back garden, you couldn't make it up, really, could you?
Yeah, no, I mean, when this was first being sort of when they were first talking about this, and then and they were saying, well, they'll have Dillian White with Povetkin then. Surely not, right? Because one thing is, I mean, Dillian White's a pay-per-view fighter now, and he's making
Yeah.
huge money, right? Now, with essentially no spectators there, I mean, I don't know what kind of spectators. I mean, they're not going to have a gate for that, right?
No.
So I imagine it'll be some kind of pay-per-view, but is that revenue enough?
Yeah, again, I was listening to one of his interviews, and it does appear it will be pay-per-view, but he was sort of, well, you know what he's like, but he did hint that it may be less than the £20, which I thought was bizarre, considering, as you mentioned, there's no gate receipt, there wouldn't be any sort of normal fight week revenue, really. So it's going to be definitely interesting to see if they do manage to get that one on the last show that they propose.
Yeah, I mean, I think Eddie Hearn did say they'd probably end up losing money out of it. But their Matchroom obviously are in quite a good financial position. So, and a few of the shows they do the sort of Saturday night fight night shows they do on Sky, they do lose money on.
Yes, yeah.
Because, the fighters' purses are creeping up, have been creeping up and up and up and up. And, a non-pay-per-view event on Sky these days, has some pretty decent fights on it, but they just, the fighters' purses and the fact that they're not really getting any pay-per-view revenue means that sometimes they're losing. I mean, I think the Callum Smith versus John Ryder fight, I think that show, supposedly lost money on it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really remember the last show that was before all this lockdown.
I'm trying to think. Well, I remember.
It wasn't. Was it Quigg and Carroll, or was there one after that?
You could be right there, although I did watch that fight, but I was quite drunk at the time.
Yeah.
But I was at a friend's house actually, and we were drinking quite heavily, and I can't remember a lot about the fight. The only thing I can remember was that Quigg got quite a hiding in that fight.
Yeah. I think if I remember, Gallagher threw the towel in the end, didn't he?
Yeah. But yeah, I think that was certainly one of the last fight nights I remember watching.
Yeah, I can't remember if Warren had a show, but then again, I don't think his shows are generally too memorable, are they?
Not really. I mean, the Warren stuff, it's not. I mean, sometimes you do get, like, I've put on a Warren show. I think the last one, Daniel Dubois fought.
Yeah, was that the Japanese guy?
No, I think it was the one before that. Like, the undercard was like guys fighting I've never heard of, but some of the fights were actually pretty decent, right?
Yeah.
But as I say, it just lacked the names. You didn't really know who these people were.
Yeah.
And obviously, Frank Warren really doesn't do himself any favors at all when he's promoting his fights, but not necessarily promoting his fights officially, because those are done in press conferences and stuff. But when he gives interviews with, some of the more well-known media outlets on YouTube, he inevitably gets asked about other things about Eddie Hearn. And sometimes I just wish he could just say, look, this is not an Eddie Hearn show. Can we please just talk about the fight? And he ends up engaging and you know, and then he never has anything good to say about any other fighters but himself, you know, his own fighters. And then that's it. And that's the one thing, actually, one of the big differences between Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren, and I'll just digress, I don't want to turn this into a Hearn v. Warren thing, is that Eddie Hearn actually does compliment fighters who are fighting on other networks and with other promoters, whether or not that's with one eye on trying to sign his fighter down the line, or whether it's actually genuine, you know, Eddie Hearn can tell you that.
Yeah. I think with him, he's definitely more sincere when he talks about the other fighters. I just think Frank Warren, I don't think, I think it's his mentality, because Eddie Hearn's what, 20, 25 years younger than him, probably
Yeah,
more. And I don't think he can contemplate the fact that he was the man, what, 10 years ago in promoting UK boxing. And now,
yeah,
since Eddie Hearn and Matchroom's revived the sport, to be honest, he's sort of been relegated to the B side. And probably, if you ask casual boxing fans, they would only probably know the likes of Daniel Dubois, Tyson Fury. But I don't think he can take the fact that boxing fans in general mock his shows, and I just think that's part of the reason why he's so bitter towards Matchroom and Eddie Hearn.
yeah. The thing is, as well, recently, I mean, Frank Warren had, I mean, his three big fighters were Tyson Fury, Billy Joe Saunders, and Josh Warrington.
Yeah.
And then to lose Billy Joe Saunders and Josh Warrington to Eddie Hearn, that, I mean, there must have been a few holes kicked in the wall of his office when that happened. Because really, okay, Daniel Dubois, but he's young, you know, he's not really fought anyone yet. He's not going to be a pay-per-view fighter.
No.
Certainly not right now. So he's only really got Tyson Fury, and Tyson Fury's fighting in America all the time. You know, so, and I'm sure he's going to be under pressure from BT. You know, when they put their pay-per-view fights on for Tyson Fury, they're on at 5 o'clock in the morning, because
Yeah.
it's not ideal. Although, you know, they'll probably still be doing well, but I mean, it's not going to be anything. It's not, you know, if you had a Tyson Fury fight on at 10 o'clock on Saturday night, you know, on BT in the UK, far better than they are doing for the numbers in America.
Yeah.
And now he's only, you know, he's only really got Tyson Fury as a pay-per-view star really on that channel, and they're not going to be doing amazing numbers fighting in America at 5 o'clock in the morning on time. So that's, I say, taking Josh Warrington and Billy Joe Saunders over a match, I think. I mean, Frank Warren must be just about on the brink of losing the plot, surely.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose you would say, until he lost to Kovalev, that Anthony Yard would have been his next big fighter.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Of course, you know, and that was actually, I mean, that at one point, if I was looking like Anthony Yard was going to win that fight, he had Kovalev. He very nearly had Kovalev there, and then obviously gassed out, and Kovalev ended up knocking him out with a jab.
Yeah.
To be fair to Anthony Yard, I mean, Kovalev does have one of the best jabs of a boxer I've seen for a while. So, I mean, you look at the Canelo fight when he fought Canelo. I mean, literally, until he got knocked out, I actually had Kovalev up in that fight.
Yeah. I mean, also, I thought he was doing very well in that fight until he did get stopped. But I think, going back to the light heavyweight division, domestically, generally, it is very good, because you've got, what, Callum Johnson, Yard, Buatsi.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, Buatsi is someone I think his last fight, I don't think he looked that great, and I can't remember who he fought. But up until then, I mean, he looked, you know, he looked very good, very powerful, right? And he was, you know, he's quick, and so there was, you know, there was a general, you know, there was a lot of sort of, I don't want to say hype, because you know, it's not like, it wasn't huge amounts of building, but every fight I saw him in, you know, he was blowing guys out of the way, and of course, Eddie Hearn's doing giving the banter as he does, building people up, and you thought, Joshua Buatsi could, he could really sort of challenge here. And then I think his last fight he had, I don't think he looked that great in it, but I mean, it's one of those things, right? You come up against someone that, and as you step up in your competition,
Yeah,
you start. Well, you don't start to struggle, but it becomes more difficult, right? You get more intelligent fighters, and you come up against styles that maybe don't suit yours, and
yeah.
all
I
of a
think
sudden,
I think the talk is for Buatsi is if Johnson wins the European title, is them two fighting later on in the year, which would be an interesting fight.
yeah, it certainly would. And I say with travel restrictions as well, it look like they're going to be in place for quite a while. It looks like there are going to have to be more domestic fights than there probably ordinarily would be. Like, they would maybe look. I mean, whether they could make Buatsi yard, with Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren basically having never had a conversation like was another thing. But I think they would, ordinarily they would build Buatsi and they would build yard, and then maybe they would face each other when one of them perhaps had a world title if they could get that far, right?
Yeah.
But they might. I mean, things going on. There's going to be, especially if they're going to be wanting to do pay-per-view fights all the time, right? Even if they had that as a support,
Yeah.
right? They're going to have to pay them decent money. And I don't know how things are going to go in the future, right? Because it's going to be a while before we've got anything like crowds again.
Yeah, Eddie was talking again, and I don't know if it's more optimism than reality, but he seemed to think that October, possibly, they could start getting crowds.
Yeah, so it's difficult because even today, I mean, I was flicking through YouTube there, and I've seen some garbage on Good Morning Britain. Not that I watch it, but it's I watch clips of Piers Morgan losing the plot.
Yeah.
I've seen clips about some kind of sex ban that's coming in today that the government are talking about, telling people that they're not allowed, when lockdowns eased, partners who don't live together are not allowed to get together and have a romantic evening together. That's going to be written into law, according to what I was seeing. I don't know how true it is. And if we're coming up with stuff like that, we're not going to be letting 20,000 people sitting all next to each other inside an indoor arena, right? That's not going to happen.
No, definitely not. Again, in terms of the fight camp, another fight on the Povetkin white card, if that comes to fruition, is Katie Taylor and Serrano. I think they're hoping to be.
Yeah. So that's actually. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of women's boxing. Don't get me wrong. I like the odd fight.
Yeah.
In between there, but I couldn't sit and watch a whole night of it.
No.
But that is obviously probably one of the most anticipated female fights out there, right? Along with the rematch with Katie Taylor and Persoon.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I actually thought Katie Taylor would have potentially lost that fight. But it's one of those. These fights they're so close that you give it a round either way. You can't complain. You give it a draw, it's fine. But it just depends on how you're looking at it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd certainly like to see that fight. Taylor and Serrano.
Yeah, I was just actually watching the interviews the other day, and another fight that interests me that they hope to do is Sam Eggington against Jordan Gill, I think he said, which would be an interesting domestic fight because obviously both had an up and down sort of start to their career as it was.
Yeah. Did Eddie Hearn say that would? I mean, was because the only things I saw him say that would likely be on there were White Povetkin and Taylor Serrano. See how, yeah, I'll have to see. It'd be interesting. I haven't actually seen Conor Benn since he got his beard transplant, so
Yeah. Yeah, when he first mentioned that, I didn't know if he was being serious or not, but yeah.
Yeah, so I think they said they were only going to be able to have 5 fights, I think he said, on there.
Yeah, that's the plan, and I think the headlines of 2 of them, I think one is going to be Terry Harper against Jonas. I think that's penciled in, and
Okay.
I think the other headline was the Eggington and Jordan Gill one, and
Yeah.
they're looking at I can't remember his name now. James DeGale's trains him. He's had quite a few losses.
Yeah,
But
I mean, it's James DeGale.
yeah, he's a trainer. He's training one of the fighters, but I can't remember who it is. But he's been on a few matching.
His trainer. Okay. Sorry, I
Yeah.
think James DeGale was going to be that.
Yeah.
No, I can't remember who James DeGale. Yeah, James DeGale's been fighting in America for a long time, so it's just one of that things. If you go off to America, you kind of lose, especially for the British fans. You have to be pretty hardcore to be following, because you've got to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to watch all their fights, right?
Yeah, I suppose from the British point of view, with fighters that have gone to America, the 2 that come to mind that probably has retained the British fans was Ricky Hatton and Amir Khan, the 2 that stand out in my mind.
Well, Amir Khan was, I remember back in 2011, I think it was, I was in America. I was over there with work, and I was in my hotel room, and I'd been out the night before, so I was feeling a bit worse for wear. So I'd climbed into bed pretty early and thought, I'll have an early night. And I put on the TV, and I think it was HBO. It might have been shows. I think it was HBO though. And I just looked at the programming, and I just saw, coming on in 10 minutes was Amir Khan versus I can't believe I forgot the guy's name, Lamont Peterson.
Oh, right, yeah.
So I was tucked up to bed, and I was like, this will do me very much. But I didn't even know the fight was on, because Khan was, I think at that time, was over in America fighting, and he kind of lost touch with that a bit. So that was pretty cool. I ended up watching that fight, and Pearson won that fight, and it was ridiculous. It was an absolute robbery. There's no way Amir Khan lost that fight in a million years. And I'm not a particularly big Amir Khan fan.
No,
so yeah, that's
my opinion, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to, you can say suspect chin, but he was knocked out by Bradis Prescott, who was a huge puncher. Canelo, huge puncher. I mean, Terence Crawford, I don't think there's anybody ever thought in the Canada Open hell of winning that fight.
No.
So, but if you go over to America and you move up in weights and try and take on the best, then, fair play to him for doing that. But,
yeah. So if the fight ever happened between him and Brook, how do you think that fight would have gone?
I think Brook would knock him. Would just knock him out. I mean, I don't know how long it would take, but I don't think Khan's got what it takes to beat Kell Brook.
No, I think there's definitely a reason why he hasn't had the fight. And when he said he first joined Matchroom, that was one of the reasons. So I think it's telling the fact that he hasn't took the fight.
Yeah, I mean, Kell Brook is Kell Brook. I mean, he was. I remember his fight with Errol Spence, and I think I actually had him winning that fight. at parts. He did really well against Errol Spence.
Yeah.
And even the Golovkin fight, he was doing pretty well, and until obviously Golovkin power just kind of took over. But Brooks well documented with the injuries and stuff that he's had, but I don't think I think Brooks would overpower him. And Khan's greatest asset is speed, but he doesn't hit particularly hard, in my opinion. And I just think Brooks got to beat him. But I don't know. They're at different weights. I don't think that I'm not even interested in that fight now. It's been too long. We've now got the coronavirus that's delayed things again. It didn't even look like it was going to get done anyway. I don't think we'll see the fight.
No, I think if we do see Kell Brook in the ring this year, I think the highly probably it'll be against Liam Smith, if anyone.
Yeah, which I would actually be looking. I would actually think that was a more intriguing fight than the Khan fight for me. Liam Smith. I mean, he fought quite recently, because Liam Smith was beaten by Canelo, wasn't
he? Yeah, he got stopped by him in the end.
Yeah, which is obviously no disgrace because Canelo Alvarez is Canelo Alvarez, but
yeah,
but I think I would much rather see him fight Liam Smith than I would fight Amir Khan, because I think as much as Khan could hit, move, and I think it would go rounds. I just think Khan's just sitting waiting for the inevitable. As soon as he catches one clean on the jaw, he's out.
Yeah, I know he fought, I think it was in Saudi Arabia, just before Christmas, Amir Khan. But the last fight he had with Matchroom, he looked awful in that fight. I think it went about 8 or 9 rounds, but he didn't look a fraction of what he was even 3 years ago.
Yeah, it's tough to know. It's like you're only as good as your last fight, and and that you had the whole situation with Smith and Saunders. They're both trying to fight Canelo. Maybe they can fight each other. You're thinking, and Billy Joe Saunders then goes and has a fight out in America, looks terrible. And then I'm sitting here thinking, well, if he fights Callum Smith, he's finished, right? And then Callum Smith fights John Ryder, and arguably loses that fight and looks terrible. And you think, well, I don't know who would win out of Saunders and Smith now, because they both look terrible.
Yeah. Speaking of John Ryder, actually, he's looking to fight Rocky Fielding in one of those Matchroom fights.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, has Fielding been out since he lost to Canelo?
Yeah, I think he fought on one of those MTK shows, but I think it was only a 6 or 8 rounder.
Oh, okay. So I never saw that. But I mean, if you're going Fielding, Fielding versus John Ryder. See, it's tough. It's all, sometimes, like I wouldn't have given, I wouldn't have said that Billy Joe Saunders would have struggled in his fight. And I didn't think Callum Smith was going to struggle too much against John Ryder. So you never can tell, right?
Yeah, and it's especially with John Ryder. I mean, he lost to Luke Blackledge, didn't he?
Yeah.
And he had a few suspect performances, but then he pulled out that fight against I've forgotten his name on the AJ undercard, which led to him being mandatory, didn't it, for Callum Smith?
Yeah. So it very much depends on how you turn up on the night as well, Like if you turn up to a fight and you've had a bad camp and you're not ready, if you're fighting someone that's anywhere near your level who has had a good camp and is ready, then the chances are you're going to get beat.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes fighters do use that as an excuse when it's not necessarily the camp's fault for performances. they just didn't turn up on the night for whatever reason.
And as long as they say that, as long as they say, look, it didn't go right tonight, and then, you don't want what the likes of the PBC fighters and Andy Ruiz and Deontay Wilder. You don't want people turning up and saying, oh, I partied too hard and I wasn't focused and everything and da 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 da. And same with Deontay Wilder, my suit was too heavy and my trainer's friends with someone else's trainer, and it's just like, guys, come on, you're professional athletes, you're world heavyweight champions. You can't be turning up to fights saying that you weren't ready.
No, I think for me that's one of the worst excuses that you could say. Fair enough if you're injured or whatever, but just that you've been over partying or your crowns to whatever Wilder come out with, I think that's just, well, it just leaves a bad taste in my opinion.
Yeah, well, this is something we should talk about in the future, because things like Deontay, obviously we're going over old ground, but literally there's nothing happening right now. So I think you'd be deserved. There hasn't been anywhere near enough said about the whole Wilder-Joshua affair. There hasn't been anywhere near enough said about, well, no, maybe there has been enough said about the Wilder excuses and Fury, but there's a lot to say on that.
Yes.
Well. And Deontay Wilder in general, because,
Yeah, okay. In that case, then, I think we'll save that for the next episode, and then we'll end this one here. Thanks for joining us on the Boxing and Wraps podcast, and we'll get back and we'll see you again soon.